Alone on the street, a cowboy's amazing words revealed the hidden strength to transform her life. Sarah sat on the sun-baked bench at the corner of Main Street, the lingering scent of fried food wafting through the air from the diner where she worked. The bus wasn't due for another 20 minutes, and she felt the weight of the world resting on her shoulders. She fiddled with the hem of her shirt, wishing she could pull the fabric taut over the insecurities that knotted in her stomach. The whispers of her neighbors echoed in her mind, each judgment a reminder of how alone she was in her struggle to provide for Lily, her bright-eyed little girl with a dream of owning a pink bike. "Why doesn't she just get a real job?" they mumbled knowingly, their voices a hum of discontent that burrowed deep into her heart. The sun beat down, and Sarah closed her eyes, desperately yearning for the understanding she often felt was out of reach. Just when the burdens became unbearable, a shadow cast over her. She opened her eyes to find an older man, a weathered cowboy with a deep-set smile standing before her. His eyes sparkled with a life lived fully, and in that moment, everything around her faded. "Name's Charlie," he said, offering a nod. She could hardly reply, the sudden calm jittering against her racing thoughts. Their conversation unfolded like a tapestry, Charlie sharing stories of ranch life, threading in lessons of perseverance learned through loss. Sarah listened, entranced, absorbing these tales as quietly as she absorbed life's hardship. "You see," Charlie said with a nod, "my mother always reminded me that resilience is woven into our blood." Each word resonated, striking chords within her that had long been silent, echoes from her grandmother's quilts, pieces stitched with love and struggle. But could she dare revive that legacy? Suddenly, her fleeting hope flickered. What if she failed? What if her passion for sewing couldn't support Lily? Fear tightened around her, a vice grip choking the spark igniting inside her. She envisioned herself trying to create beautiful quilts, only for critics to circle like sharks, gnashing their teeth at her ambition. "You think you can make a living from quilts? Get real," one neighbor might say. The laughter that followed would pierce her heart, just like it had in the past. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension in her heart swelled to a fever pitch. Could she truly counter the hesitations clawing at her? She imagined displaying her work at the upcoming fair. What if no one stopped to admire her creations? Anxiety twisted in her chest as her thoughts flooded with uncertainty, each breath feeling heavier than the last. Would she step into the spotlight and claim her worth, or would self-doubt shatter her before she even began? In that crucible of pressure, surrounded by memories of family legacy and dreams for Lily, Sarah found herself teetering on the edge. Charlie's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to stand firm. But doubts churned violently, a tempest threatening to sweep her away. What would happen when she had to confront her own worst critic, the voice inside her that questioned her very right to dream? The bus's arrival was imminent, yet her decision loomed greater than the few seconds stretching before her. As the bus came into view, its rumbling engine broke through Sarah's tumultuous thoughts. The jarring reality of her situation ignited a flicker of clarity within. She needed to act, not postpone. Thoughts of the unkempt sewing corner in her apartment rushed forward, threads strewn about like her aspirations. Every fabric piece represented a possibility, every stitch a step away from the doubts that bound her. Clenching her fists, she felt a spark ignite in the pit of her stomach. With a deep breath, she stood, determination mingling with the fading heaviness of her fears. She boarded the bus, the familiar routine beginning, but this time, she was acutely aware of the choices stretching ahead of her. As the city whirled by outside, she imagined herself sitting at that cluttered table, scissors in hand, empowered by each snip she made through the fabric of her past. The thought filled her with a sense of purpose. She could transform her fears into quilts of vulnerability and strength. Turning the corner onto Oak Street, Sarah felt the weight of potential resting not just upon her shoulders, but in the air, thick like the humidity before a summer storm. Each drop of the looming potential hung suspended, waiting for her to plunge into action. As a child, she had felt the warmth of her grandmother's arms enveloping her while sharing stories of craftsmanship. Motherhood now fueled her creativity, igniting a desire to pass down that love and artistry to Lily, who deserved not just a bike, but a legacy of strength. That night, Sarah laid out her plans on the table strewn with swatches, a quilt adorned with memories, triumphs, and resilience. She envisioned the fabric capturing both her struggles and her dreams. With each piece she stitched, she could leave behind whispers of doubt and weave a new narrative, one infused with heart and spirit. But the taste of ambition was laced with anxiety. What if the world rejected her creations? What if the very act of sewing her dreams made her vulnerable to ridicule? Whispers of neighbors crawled back into her mind. Why doesn't she just get a real job? The echoes paralyzed her, a weight so familiar yet so unfounded. Compelling her to rise, the clarity of Charlie's confidence re-emerged. Resilience is woven into our blood. Could she embody that same strength? Could she confront those fears? Standing at the edge of self-doubt, she devised a plan. She outlined each step necessary to prepare for the fair, pressing her fingertips into the fabric of her goals. The designs, the budget, the discussions at the diner when customers would ask her about her work. In the days that followed, her life became a tapestry of determination. Each interaction with Lily became an opportunity to share her growing passion, igniting the spark in her daughter's eyes while nurturing the fire in her own heart. Time blurred as Sarah spent evenings hunched over her sewing machine, defying the murmurs of uncertainty with every computed stitch. Yet, as the day of the fair approached, a dark cloud enveloped her spirit. Shadows of doubt swirled like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. Fissures began to emerge in Sarah's resolve as she contemplated her unfulfilled fears. Would she be brave enough to place her creations in the hands of others, risking rejection? The night before the fair, sleep evaded her as racing thoughts punctured her fragile calm. She stood before the mirror, desperation creeping into her reflection. "Can I do this?" she whispered, the question weighing heavily, almost suffocating in its simplicity. The answer lingered, just out of reach, teasing her with glimpses of the future she desired. With the dawn breaking on this pivotal day, she turned back to the sewing table one last time. She gathered her quilts, each a testament to her journey of growth. Outside, the morning sun illuminated the path she was about to tread, yet the fear of exposure held her back. The time had come to face the fair, and whatever awaited there, a storm brewing within her soul. Would she rise to the challenge, or retreat back into the shadows she fought to escape? The streets bustled with life as Sarah stepped out of her apartment, each footstep echoing her uncertainty. The quilts, now neatly folded and cradled in her arms, felt heavier than before, the fabric imbued with a weight of expectation. She crossed the threshold of her home, immersing herself in the vibrant pulse of the city. The sun beamed down, casting her shadow long and thin, just like her confidence. Every turn brought different faces, some mirroring her struggle. A street performer strummed a guitar, his lyrics weaving stories of hardship and hope. The notes danced through the air like whispers from another world, inviting her to pause and listen. But Sarah couldn't linger. She pressed on, acutely aware of the fair waiting at the end of her journey. Her heart raced as she arrived, the venue alive with color and activity. Booths flanked the walkway, each one showcasing original creations, a testament to the creativity of its owner. As she stepped closer, she glanced at others interpreting their thoughts, their struggles laid bare for the world to see. Yet a stab of insecurity pierced her resolve. What if her quilts paled against theirs? A voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "You look uncertain. This is your first time?" Startled, Sarah turned to see an older gentleman with a wide-brimmed hat, his eyes reflecting a warmth that felt instantly reassuring. He leaned against a nearby stool, hands comfortably tucked in his pockets. Something about him seemed out of place amidst the chaos, and yet he exuded a calm that pulled her in. "Yes," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm here to share my quilts, but I'm scared." Ah, fear, a companion we all know too well. But fear is just the other side of ambition, you know. His tones were like the gentle rhythm of his guitar, soothing yet compelling. You've sewn dreams into those pieces. They are as much a part of you as your heart and spirit. His words struck a chord within her, and in that moment, she understood. She wasn't merely displaying quilts. She was unveiling a piece of herself, a narrative stitched together from the frayed edges of her life. Shifting her gaze back to her creations, she realized they were more than fabric. They were woven with memories, with love, with resilience. "What if they don't like them?" she muttered, the fear surfacing once more. "Rejection is just one opinion," he replied, his eyes twinkling under the sun. "More importantly, each stitch is an affirmation of who you are. Show your truth, and those who resonate will come to you." As he spoke, a sense of empowerment coursed through her veins. The shadows constricting her heart began to ebb, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. With clarity she hadn't felt before, she felt the weight of fear transform into strength. "Why did you decide to create?" he continued, urging her deeper. "Your story matters." Before she could catch herself, Sarah described her journey, the love for her daughter, the quilting traditions passed down from her grandmother, the pressures that silenced her for too long. Words spilled forth, laced with both passion and vulnerability. The cowboy's eyes never left her, absorbing her truth, validating her journey. As she spoke, the world around her faded into a blur. It was just them in that moment, and she felt as if the burdens she carried were lightening. With newfound courage blooming inside, Sarah recognized that today was not only about the fair, it was about claiming her space, her voice. The cowboy's words ignited in her an urge to begin, to share, to connect with others through her quilts. As she turned to set up her booth, a pulse of anticipation brimming beneath her skin, she smiled. This wasn't just an event, it was a chance to forge a new path, one welcoming her vulnerabilities and triumphs alike. But her resolve only slightly eclipsed the lingering shadows of self-doubt lurking in the corners. Yet, as she prepared to unveil her creations, a lurch of apprehension froze her in place, heart racing once more. Would she truly dare to expose this piece of her soul? The moment was upon her, the choice pressing. In that space between fear and courage, what would she choose? With the crowd beginning to swell around her booth, Sarah took a deep breath. The challenge to reveal herself had arrived. Sarah stood behind her booth, the fabric of her quilts draped like a vibrant mosaic of her life's history. Each piece seemed to pulse with energy, almost echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. She felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, but couldn't shake the chill of anxiety gripping her stomach. What if no one came? What if they didn't understand or simply ignored her? The crowd flowed past like a rushing river, people engaged in conversations, laughter, and admiring the countless booths. Sarah's throat tightened as she fidgeted with the edge of one quilt. Could she truly stand out among this sea of creativity? What stories were captured within the stitches of her work that would resonate with anyone? Glancing at the first few passers-by, Sarah noticed their wandering eyes skimming over her booth, paying little attention. A knot formed in her chest. She forced a smile, pushing through her hesitation. Those quilts! Her quilts! She had poured herself into every thread, drawing on memories of joy intermingled with her losses. Perhaps that was what she needed to share, her commitment to not just create, but to connect. Gathering what felt like all her courage, Sarah decided she would speak, not just display. "Hello," she called out, her voice tentative but louder this time. As a couple approached, she continued, "These quilts are inspired by my journey. Each stitch holds a story. I'd love to share it with you." The woman stopped, intrigued. "What story?" she asked, her eyes flicking to the intricate patterns. Sarah felt her heart race but focused on the woman's face, reading the curiosity lighting her features. "This one represents my grandmother's teachings. Each pattern reflects her hands guiding me through the fabric of our lives. And this," she motioned to another quilt, "is about the strength I found in raising my daughter alone, the colors expressing the joy and trials of motherhood." As she spoke, the words flowed more easily, the quilts transforming into conduits of connection. People nodded, stepping closer. A few began to ask questions, their interest palpable. The barriers she had built around herself began to dissolve with each interaction. The crowd wasn't just a mass of strangers. They were potential connections, individuals ready for her story. With every spoken word, Sarah felt a shift within her. She stopped worrying about whether they liked her quilts. It became about sharing her journey instead. Each response from the growing audience empowered her. They leaned in, eager to hear more, their expressions shifting from indifference to compassion. This was what the cowboy had meant. Showing her truth drew people in. At that moment, Sarah realized the stitches were not just representations of her past, but bridges to uncharted futures. Her vulnerabilities, once obstacles, were now the threads that wove her story into the fabric of the community. This understanding ignited a burst of creative energy within her, spurring her to expand beyond quilts. What if she could organize workshops? Could she inspire others like her, stirred by her newfound voice? However, as she continued engaging with the crowd, someone from the edge of the gathering stepped forward. A man in a business suit, arms crossed, with an expression that radiated skepticism. His presence sent a wave of tension through Sarah. She wondered if he was about to raise doubts, take her back to the brink of her insecurities. "What makes these quilts so special?" he challenged, his tone sharp. The crowd grew silent, their attention shifting. Sarah's heart sank, the pressure tightening around her chest again. This would be the pivotal moment, the confrontation she'd have to face. In her silent deliberation, she questioned, could she hold her ground against skepticism? She felt the weight of expectation, not only from the audience, but from herself to defend her art. The man's gaze remained fixed, challenging her to respond, to expose the vulnerability she was beginning to embrace. Would she falter under his scrutiny, or rise to meet it? In that moment, she was presented with a choice that would further define her journey. Would Sarah give in to doubt, or step forward to speak her truth? The path ahead felt both perilous and exhilarating, teetering on the edge of discovery. The silence stretched, an almost tangible force that threatened to suffocate her newfound courage. Sarah's heart pounded, each beat urging her to take a breath, gather her thoughts, and respond with clarity. She recalled the faces of those who had listened, who had leaned in as she opened her heart, and she felt a flicker of strength from within. "This isn't just about quilts," Sarah finally said, her voice steadier than she had anticipated. "Each quilt represents a chapter in my life, moments of happiness and struggle. They are woven with intention and memory." The man raised an eyebrow, still skeptical. "Memory isn't what sells." His tone dripped with condescension, and Sarah could feel a tide of doubt threatening to wash over her, pulling her back into that dark space where fear lurked. But instead of retreating, something shifted within her. The reflection of her journey, the pain, the inspiration, the passion, flared to life. "What if that's precisely what makes them valuable?" she pushed back, emboldened by the very emotions he sought to undermine. "Art offers connection. These quilts convey resilience, community, and shared experiences. They tell stories that resonate far beyond the threads." She glanced around at the gathered crowd. There was a shift in their expressions. She could see the intrigue sparking in their eyes. Maybe none of them were truly indifferent after all. Maybe they were waiting for someone to defend the beauty of imperfection, the strength in vulnerability. The businessman hesitated, his expression softening just a fraction. There was a chance he might be shifting, but doubt clung to him like a shadow. Sarah seized the opportunity. "There's beauty in impermanence. My journey hasn't been perfect, and these quilts reflect that. They're an invitation for others to share their own narratives, to realize that they too can create something beautiful from their struggles." The murmurs began again, ripples of acknowledgement flowing through the crowd. The conversation had shifted from skepticism to curiosity. Perhaps the businessman's question had been more than a challenge. Perhaps it had been an opportunity to clarify her purpose. She could see nods of agreement, soft smiles blossoming among the listeners. The intangible wall that had separated her from them was crumbling. "I didn't know you could feel so much from a quilt," a woman in the front admitted, eyes wide with understanding, leaning closer. "It's like a piece of you is on display." Sarah felt warmth flooding her chest. For the first time, she was beginning to grasp the reach of her influence. This was more than sharing her story. It was about empowering others to tell theirs. In that moment, she understood the direction her journey could take. Workshops, exhibitions, perhaps even a storytelling circle built around the art of quilting, each thread binding a community of experiences together. The businessman stood silent, his arms slowly uncrossing as he absorbed the shifting dynamics around him. He was becoming just another face in the crowd, witnessing the change Sarah had ignited. "And who knows," Sarah continued, the excitement blooming within her, "maybe together we can create a quilt that encompasses all of our stories, each square a testament to our individual journeys." Her own thoughts raced ahead, envisioning a future filled with creativity and collaboration, where she could inspire others to find their voice. But as she glanced back at the man, the flicker of determination faded as quickly as it had ignited, his eyebrows pulled together in contemplation. What would he do next? Would he dismiss her words, or would he recognize the potential in her vision? The crowd was focused and engaged, and Sarah felt a rush of empowerment wash over her. But the moment held its tension, awaiting the businessman's response, the one that could either bolster her emerging vision or threaten to shove her back into the shadows of self-doubt. "Your time is up," he finally said, a hint of competition in his voice, not dismissive but challenging. "You'll need more than passion to make this work. Are you ready to climb that mountain?" And that question hung in the air, a statement that felt like an ultimatum. Could she embrace the challenge, step into the unknown, and prove her worth? It was the uncertainty ahead that ignited the fire in her soul. The path to transformation had just begun, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Would she take the leap, or would she allow fear to stifle her aspirations once again? The question echoed in Sarah's mind, a blend of doubt and determination that swirled into an intoxicating concoction. What did he mean, climb that mountain? Was he suggesting impossibility? Or was he merely testing her resolve? An urgency coursed through her veins as she recognized that this was not just someone challenging her, it was an opportunity, a calling to actualize her dreams. As the crowd began to disperse, some murmured their appreciation while others looked decidedly unconvinced. Sarah could feel their stares, some filled with hope, others laced with skepticism. Every glance was a reminder that her words had sparked something in them, and the realization solidified her resolve. It was time to elevate her narrative beyond mere words. Back at her workspace, a modest corner of her small apartment cluttered with fabric swatches and half-finished quilts, Sarah sat with her sketchbook open. Her fingers danced across the pages as she outlined workshops in bold letters. Story Quilts 101, Finding Voice Through Fabric, Connecting Threads of Experience. This was it, the path she wanted to carve for herself, for her art, but most importantly, for others yearning to reveal their stories. But doubts lurked in the background like unwelcome phantoms, whispering accusations of inadequacy. What did she know about leading workshops? Who was she to think she could inspire others? Clenching her jaw, she pressed on, visualizing each session. Would her heart be enough? Would vulnerability be a tool or an obstacle? Over the next week, Sarah threw herself into research, unearthing resources on teaching art and facilitating groups. She spent late nights drafting an outline for her first workshop, balancing it with her day job. Her life became a constant cycle of preparation and reflection, each stitch connecting the fabric of her ambition with her fear. Every time she pinned a new apron to the wall, a symbol of her commitment, her confidence grew incrementally. The more she shared her plans with friends, the more support she garnered. "You have a unique vision," they said. "People need this." Their encouragement reminded her of that moment on stage when she felt the crowd lean in, eager for her words. But voices of doubt would snarl back. "You're taking a risk. Who are you to lead?" Sarah gritted her teeth, determining that she could create a safe space for others. Her journey was not perfect, but it was hers. It was authentic. She identified her vulnerability as a strength, a quality that could guide others in their journeys of materializing self-worth. Finally, the day arrived when she was to introduce her workshop series. A small local community space hosted the first gathering. As she set up, arranging fabric swatches and brochures, an almost suffocating tension coiled in her stomach. Each footstep echoed, amplifying her anxiety, and the room felt like a proving ground for her ambitions. The attendees trickled in, a diverse group, each bringing their unseen stories. Their eyes were hesitant yet curious, mirroring her own. What was she to say? What words would settle the tension, fill the space with purpose? And then, before she could give in to the wave of self-doubt crashing over her, she saw a familiar face, the skeptical businessman from her earlier confrontation standing at the back of the room. His expression was unreadable, a mix of intrigue and challenge that stirred an old sense of competition. Sarah's heart raced. She couldn't escape him here. Amidst the rustle of fabric and whispered greetings, there lay an electrifying opportunity. She could either back down or face him head-on. This was not only about quilts anymore, it was about utilizing every ounce of her courage to stand firm in her identity and purpose. "Welcome, everyone," she began, voice steady, building from that moment of vulnerability. "Today, we weave not just fabric, but the stories that are inherently ours. Let's climb this mountain together." And as she watched the collective focus hone in on her, resolve solidified within. This moment, raw and potent, marked the start of something greater. But the question lingered in her mind. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the weight of the moment prove insurmountable? With breaths held and eyes fixed on her, she welcomed the challenge, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As Sarah stood in the dimly lit room, the air thick with anticipation, she felt an overwhelming surge of emotions. This was her moment to carve a space for herself and, potentially, for others to begin their own journeys. She swallowed the doubt that threatened to choke her, forcing herself to meet the curious gazes of her attendees. Each one of them, like her, carried unspoken burdens and desires, waiting for the right catalyst to uncover their stories. "Let's start with introductions," she continued, her voice steady, breaking the thick silence. Names floated around like whispers, each accompanied by a glimpse of something profound. A young woman spoke about how she had always found peace in sewing but felt guilty for treating it as a hobby instead of a career. An older man revealed his long-lost dream of creating quilts that depicted his family's history. Sarah noted their hesitations, the way their voices trembled with vulnerability. As they shared, a small flame ignited within her, a realization that her own hesitations mirrored those of her participants. In this circle of sharing, vulnerability was both a weapon and a shield. It empowered individuals while also revealing the beauty of shared struggles. Sarah guided the conversation gently, facilitating stories that flowed into one another like the threads of fabric they would soon be working with. There was a natural rhythm growing, a pulse that beat in time with their revelations. With each person who spoke, she felt herself leaning into her role, finding joy in the connection that unfolded. After the introductions, she encouraged them to select fabric swatches that resonated with their personal stories. The simplicity of the task filled the air with excitement. Colors and textures came to life under the eager hands of her attendees. It was here, amidst their laughter and thoughtful expressions, that Sarah found her footing. "Your experiences matter, and the way you express them can transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you," she declared, surprise flooding her at her own certainty. The words tumbled out, frank and unapologetic, granting her a sense of authority she hadn't anticipated. But then, she glanced toward the back of the room, her gaze landing on the businessman, a specter haunting her newfound confidence. His presence weighed heavily. Every time she caught the corner of his eye, she felt a crack in her resolve. He was not just an observer, he was a challenge. Pushing back against this mental tide, she refocused her attention on her participants, crafting a delicate web of encouragement and artistic expression. As they began to create their tail quilts, Sarah moved among the tables, offering guidance and spark. She watched smiles emerge, edges of self-doubt softening amidst the vibrant hues of fabric. Something within her shifted. She realized she was not merely facilitating a workshop, she was reshaping lives, hers included. Yet lurking behind the exhilaration was a gnawing question. Would she slip into old habits of comparison and inadequacy when faced with judgment? Each interaction with the businessman served as a reminder that external validation still loomed over her aspirations. "Let's take a break," she announced, needing to catch her breath and regroup her thoughts. The conversations buzzed with enthusiasm, but she felt isolated within her own mind, grappling between satisfaction in her growth and the dread of potential collapse. Finding solace in a nearby window, she gazed outside at the city streets, a patchwork of lives intertwining just like the quilts. Suddenly, the voice of the businessman echoed in her mind, the challenge he posed demanding attention. Rather than allowing him to intimidate her further, she felt a shift in perspective. Maybe it was time to confront him directly and acknowledge the doubt he represented. What could she gain from addressing his skepticism head-on? The thought intrigued her, charged with both fear and determination. As she re-entered the room, Sarah called her participants back to attention, her heart racing with newfound clarity. Let's reflect on what it means to be bold. What can we reveal when we face those who challenge our narratives? The question hung heavily in the air, sparking a collective pause among them. This was more than just a question about art. It was an invitation to explore their deepest fears, the very mountains they needed to climb. And with every entry into personal growth, Sarah realized that the real mountain was still ahead. Would she muster the courage to face the businessman again, to elevate her resolve and put her beliefs to the ultimate test? Only time would reveal if she could walk the path she envisioned, both for herself and for those looking to her for guidance. As the chatter in the room tapered off, Sarah felt an electric tension coursing through her. It was as if each participant was holding their breath, suspended in the air between their dreams and their fears, waiting for her signal to leap. The prospect of addressing the businessman loomed large in her mind, gripping her with both fear and exhilaration. The group huddled over their various fabrics, crafting stories in vivid colors and textures, all while she considered her next move. The question she had posed lingered like a haunting melody, and she could sense their unease merging with her own. Confidence wasn't fluid, it was fragile, and Sarah was painfully aware of how volatile it could become in the face of opposition. Wandering from table to table, she observed the vibrant discussions unfolding around her. A woman in her 30s intensely debated the symbolism of a blue swatch against her experiences of loss. An elderly man chose rich earth tones as he spoke nostalgically about his childhood home, weaving a tapestry of memories into the fabric. Each piece they selected was imbued with meaning, yet she felt a smoldering dissonance within herself, a mismatch between the outward authority she projected and the turmoil seething beneath the surface. There was something undeniably powerful in watching her attendees shed their fears, and she craved that same freedom. But was she merely a guide? Or could she claim that status for herself? The businessman's gaze flickered back into her thoughts, taunting her like a spectre waiting in the wings. The challenge he represented was relentless, a constant reminder of the self-imposed limitations she feared were suffocating her aspirations. "Let's do something daring," she declared suddenly, shaking off the looming spectre. The unexpected decision vibrated through her like a drumbeat. "I want each of you to share an experience that you've been afraid to talk about. Let's start breaking apart these barriers together." Awkward silence settled among them at first, quickly replaced by murmurs of apprehension, but the tremor of her voice held a clarity that seemed to sharpen their own awareness. Slowly they began to share stories layered with trauma, regret, and ultimately hope. As they bared their souls, she felt the weight of her own hesitations begin to lighten. But still, the businessman lingered in her mind. What if she reached out to confront him now, in this moment of collective vulnerability? The thought both excited and terrified her. Could she risk exposing herself to judgment again when she felt so raw? Pushing her insecurities aside, she paced between the sewing machines. "What if we invite a critic into our narrative?" she posed, fidgeting with a thread. "What if we redefine that relationship? Instead of shying away from judgment, why not lean into it and articulate our value?" A ripple of intrigue spread across the room, with eyes widening and heads nodding. The businessman no longer felt like an adversary. He was a bridge to cross, a necessary confrontation that could either fortify her path or unravel it. "Let's formulate a plan," she said, rallying her participants. "We'll draft a collective response, a declaration of our worth that can withstand skepticism. We'll articulate not just our stories, but the strength we gain through them." As they began brainstorming, Sarah's heart raced at the prospect of her own confrontation. A voice echoed in the back of her mind, imploring her to embrace her hesitation and cast it into the fire of determination. This act could fortify not just her, but each one of them. "Tomorrow I'll speak to him. I won't let fear dictate my narrative," she whispered to herself, the resolution settling like steel in her spine. Breathless anticipation fueled her as they collectively penned their declaration. But amidst the burgeoning excitement, an unsettling thought prickled her consciousness. What if the businessman pushed back? What if he questioned her very right to lead this diverse group? Just as realization dawned, the air thickened with a peculiar tension, and she sensed they were all on the brink of something formidable, the confrontation of their most potent fears, the unveiling of hidden strengths. And as they crafted their words, a tapestry of experiences and courage, Sarah knew that the following day would not just demand her confrontation with the businessman, it would redefine who she was meant to be. Tomorrow would test her resolve in ways she had never imagined. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the specter of doubt dismantle her newfound confidence? Only the unfolding narrative of courage and complexity would tell. The next morning arrived like a tempest, bringing with it a rush of anxiety that surged through Sarah as she prepared for the impending confrontation. The air in her small studio felt different, charged with purpose. She stood in front of the mirror, running her fingers through her hair, attempting to compose herself. Each reflection seemed to offer not just a glimpse of her exterior, but a stirring bundle of potential. This was more than just a meeting. It was a pivotal crossing into territory she felt both drawn to and terrified of. Her heart thudded as she mentally rehearsed her declaration. Each carefully chosen word was a lifeline thrown into an ocean of uncertainty. Confidence had never come easily to her, and despite the resolve she clung to from the night before, the businessman's piercing gaze still haunted her thoughts. How would he receive her? As she headed out, she felt the weight of her participants' stories pressed against her chest like armor. Each narrative she had embraced the previous day became a thread in the fabric of her own courage. She would not only present her vision, but embody their combined strength. With each step away from the studio, a sense of responsibility blossomed within her. Their voices echoed in her mind, urging her forward. But a shadow loomed larger than anticipated as she approached the sleek corporate building where she was to meet the businessman. His reputation as a critical evaluator preceded him. Would he see through her facade? Would he dismiss her project as mere whimsy, unworthy of serious consideration? Taking a slow, deep breath, she steadied her shaking hands, her mind racing with strategies to reinforce her stance. Inside the lobby, Sarah was greeted by the minimalist elegance of the space, but it offered no comfort. Every second felt stretched, magnifying her doubts. She practiced her words silently, embracing the tension and allowing it to fuel her determination rather than stifle it. This was a test, not just of her resolve, but of her worthiness to lead, to claim her space in a world that often relegated her to the sidelines. When the businessman finally appeared, he exuded an air of authority, sharp and impeccably composed. She felt small in comparison, but there was no turning back now. The conversation began polite enough, filled with exchanges about trends and projections, but the edges began to blur into deeper discussions as they shifted from business jargon into the heart of her passion. Then came the moment that surged the adrenaline to a boiling point, as Sarah brought forth the collective declaration she had written with her group. "I believe we can redefine what vulnerability means in our work," she said, her voice steady despite the tremors beneath. "Our stories matter. Every single one adds to the strength of our narrative. We deserve your engagement, not just your critique." There was a moment of silence that felt like an eternity, the businessman's eyes narrowing as he processed her words. Did she see uncertainty flicker behind his professional facade? Was that a question of consideration? For the first time, she noticed the human underneath his tailored exterior. "You think your stories can withstand scrutiny?" he finally asked, skepticism edging his tone. "Yes, because they have already begun to thrive under the weight of honesty," she replied, emboldened by the conviction surging within her. "They transform fear into strength, and I stand here, ready to partner with you, not just to sell an idea, but to foster understanding." As the dialogue twisted, Sarah felt a palpable shift. The businessman's curt demeanor softened, revealing an unexpected willingness to engage. They navigated through questions, challenges, and defenses, but his resistance slowly transformed into curiosity. Each response she crafted was not merely about defending her project. They were explorations of the depth of her potential, devoutly reshaping her professional landscape. And yet, just when it appeared they were reaching a turning point, he leveled a piercing question that pierced through her growing confidence. "What will you do if this doesn't work?" if your plan fails? Sarah halted, confrontation flickering across her mind. Failure was a looming shadow, yet instead of allowing panic to unravel her, she sensed a surge of clarity. Then I will continue to share my story, learn and adapt, because vulnerability is not a weakness, it's my greatest strength. This, she realized, was the crux of her challenge. It wasn't merely about convincing him or securing validation. It was about owning her narrative, the triumphs, the failures, and everything in between. The dialogue hung in the air, charged and electric. The moment was ripe for resolution. She felt an awakening within, an understanding that this confrontation was not just with him but with herself. The spectre of doubt had started to dissipate, but now a new set of questions loomed. Could she truly transform this encounter into an opportunity for growth, not only for herself, but for those she had brought along in her heart? Would she be able to sustain this momentum, or would doubt seek its way back in? The moment of truth lay before her, fragile yet inexplicably powerful. In the quiet aftermath of their conversation, Sarah felt the air shift, as if reality itself were waiting for her next words to fill the silence. The challenge posed by the businessman lingered, forming a backdrop to her reflections. It was no longer just a battle of persuasion, it had grown into a confrontation with the inner voice that had held her captive for far too long. "Failure is merely a stepping stone," she asserted, her voice steady. "Every stitch in my quilts tells of perseverance. If I falter, it won't signify the end but a lesson leading to the next endeavor." This profound realization became a beacon, illuminating the power of vulnerability, not as a risk but as an intricate strength. The businessman shifted slightly in his seat, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "That's an interesting perspective," he said slowly, measuring his words. "You're suggesting that your art transcends the product. It connects on a human level." "Yes!" The enthusiasm surged through her. "It's about community. Our individual stories weave together, creating a shared narrative of resilience. It's how we uplift each other through the act of creation." His expression softened, and for the first time, she saw the potential for genuine curiosity twinkling in his eyes. "Perhaps you're onto something I hadn't considered. Take your concepts beyond the workshop, develop a narrative that can engage a broader audience." With every exchange, she felt grounded. The woman who once doubted her abilities now stood firm, ready to embrace the potential of collaboration, not just for herself, but for the community she sought to foster. "What would be your next steps if we were to take this forward?" His challenge had shifted now, evolving from skepticism to inquiry. Drawing upon months of reflection and careful planning, Sarah outlined a series of actionable steps. Workshops to be expanded into a summer program, community events anchored in storytelling, and even a small exhibit showcasing each participant's experience through their creations. The businessman listened intently, his eyebrows slightly raised in intrigued consideration. This was the moment where she could demonstrate her growth. Her vision was no longer isolated, it was collaborative, inclusive. "That sounds promising," he replied finally, his tone shifting to one of professional respect. "But you'll need to document your process, show your impact. It could be beneficial in amplifying what you want to achieve." Sarah nodded, her pulse quickening with possibilities. Documentation hadn't been a part of her original plan, but every suggestion felt like another thread weaving into an intricate tapestry of potential. "I'll create a narrative report to track progress and gather insights," she affirmed, her confidence blossoming. As their conversation flowed, Sarah felt herself immersed in possibility. The doubts that had once tethered her to self-imposed limitations were now but shadows, shrinking in the face of the light she was allowing herself to shine. The resurgence of her ambition echoed Charlie's words. Resilience was indeed woven into her blood. With a final exchange of ideas, their meeting concluded not with the severing of partnership, but with mutual respect and curiosity forming the foundation for future collaboration. As she stepped outside, the world brightened with the knowledge that she was on the cusp of something monumental, not just for herself, but for others walking alongside her in their journey of transformation. In the days that followed, Sarah channeled her newfound clarity into action. She set up her workshops with structure, adding layers of support and clear guidance. Participants arrived, fueled by her energy and the understanding that vulnerability was not a hindrance, it was an embrace welcoming growth. Quilted stories commenced flowing, each patch representing struggles and triumphs, perfectly imperfect, just as life intended. People began to connect not only through fabric but through shared narratives, fostering a community rich in authenticity and resilience. At the summer showcase, Sarah stood before a vibrant array of quilts draped elegantly across a makeshift gallery. Each quilt sparkled under the soft lighting, weaving together tales of growth and strength, not just from her hands but from many who had discovered their voice through creation. Today was more than an exhibition, it was a celebration of transformation. As attendees admired the intricacies of each piece, they engaged in discussions echoing compassion and connection. Laughter mingled with tears, and for the first time in her professional journey, Sarah basked not only in recognition but in fulfillment. A familiar face appeared among the gathering, the businessman now visibly softened by the celebration of human stories. They exchanged respectful nods, a silent acknowledgement of battles won and the path that stretched ahead. Confidence surged through her with an intensity she hadn't imagined possible. As she prepared to address the crowd, the weight of fear lifted like a fog under a blazing sun. Today, we celebrate more than just quilts. We celebrate resilience. We celebrate our narratives intertwining, a testament to the power of transforming fear into strength. This is our legacy, each thread a journey woven into the fabric of our lives. As applause filled the air, Sarah stood embraced by her community, each individual a piece of her story, each quilt a reflection of her unwavering growth. She had conquered the demons of doubt, emerging victorious and filled with purpose. Sarah had not only transformed her life, but had ignited the spirits of those around her. In that moment, she understood that her journey would continue, each new challenge an invitation to weave deeper connections through the art of storytelling. Life pulsed vividly like the colors of her quilts, and she would not take a single stitch for granted. You need to subscribe now to catch the next exclusive stories of personal overcoming and transformation. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep inspiring journeys alive. Comment your thoughts and emotional reactions to Sarah's victory and plans, sharing your connections or experiences that resonate. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. We're all in this together on our paths to growth.